pleased to see all of you here with us this evening. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started and just ask you to take note that we have provided evaluation forms for this event under your chair, and if at the end you would fill them out, we would be very pleased to have them. We use them for statistical information to assist with our programming and funding initiatives. This evening we have Dr. Judith S Schwartz, who is professor and head of sculpture in the craft media area at New York University, where she teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in sculpture and mixed media. In addition to teaching, and she is a woman of many talents, Judith has curated many national and international exhibitions and published widely on contemporary ceramics, and that includes her book, Confrontational Clay. We'll have this out if you're interested in looking at it. She also did a previous version, well, it's not really previous, precedent, I suppose, Confrontational Clay, and both of these publications will be out in the gallery area. She currently serves as Vice President of the Council of the International Academy of Ceramics, as a member of the Advisory Committee for the Joseph Schein International Museum of Ceramic Arts at Alfred University, which you may know is another one of the leading educational institutions for ceramics, and finally board president of the Museum of Ceramic Art in New York. Among her awards, she is an honorary member of InCiteful, which is the Ceramic Educators Association, a J.D. Rockefeller III grantee, a Fulbright Senior Specialist to the National School of Art and Design in Dublin, and an Educator of the Year at the Renwick Museum of Art in Washington, D.C., which is devoted to craft. I will tell you that along with being a very successful curator and teacher, Judith is a delightful person to know, and I hope if you have a chance to speak with her that you will take full advantage of this opportunity. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Schwartz.
Thank you, Arlette. Now, water myself in my chair. Great. I can't tell you how nice it is to be here. First of all, the restoration or reinventing this space is extraordinary. I've never seen anything quite so unique, and I'm going to use it as a model because there are lots of post offices around that need to be, and they're in the center of town, and they are walkable. And if you still have people coming in wanting to mail letters, good. They might see some art now when they walk in. But I really think it's a fantastic idea. And so I thank you. I'm going home with that. I also want to thank Arlette because she worked with me at Exhibits USA to first get this show on the road, so to speak. So thank you. And what a delight it was to come and meet Vicki. Barry, thank you very much to have your enthusiasm. But a museum is a bunch of wonderful people working together. So, Tim, thank you. The exhibition is hung beautifully. Lighting is superb. Thank you. And with Carrie and Cassie, you know, it's a team of people working at a museum that really bring things together. And museums are very special places, you know, where ideas come together and it's posed in a setting that enables you to sit and study and learn and be informed. And where would we be without the great museums like this one? So I am really delighted to be here and wanting to illuminate the role, the current role, I think, that clay has about communicating ideas about life and demonstrating its power as an art form. Now, as a curator and educator, I'm a collector, I'm really quite familiar, I think, with the capabilities of this extraordinary material to demonstrate and push boundaries, making powerful statements about our time and our place. So, the topic of confrontational work, as you saw in the catalog that Arlette showed, became of interest to me in the 70s when I first began to research it as a topic for my dissertation, which was called Satire in Contemporary American Ceramic Art. At that time, I was focusing merely on Robert Arneson. You know how dissertations are. You have to limit, delimit. And it was Arneson, David Gilhooly, and Howard Kotler. And then 15 years later, after the dissertation, it grew into the catalog called Confrontational Clay. It was a very controversial exhibition. It drew widespread attention. It was banned by the church, which in turn, in fact, even brought greater visibility and power to the fact that clay, this ubiquitous, tiny little nothing material, could be so powerful and raise so many issues. I felt wonderful. So my research continued. 5 years later, I brought this international scope. Confrontational Clay only dealt with 25 American artists, but that show generated so much interest, not only in the material, but in the ideas, that I had 800 artists from around the world contact me, wanting to show me that they too were working in this area. So now what I think this book from 42 countries, 240 artists, I think I now have coined a movement, if you might call it that. And this lecture is this newest version of confrontational clay, InCiteful Clay, because it keeps reinventing itself, and this is now the next generation. So the book of 25, the initial exhibition with only 25 artists, were of an older generation. This is now the newest incarnation. Now the decades in the latter part of, are you getting too much feedback? Is this okay? My voice is okay? Great. The decades in the latter part of the 20th century have borne witness to enormous social changes. Institutions that were deeply enriched with values had come under attack from all directions. And of course, technology has forever altered the world as we knew it and know it. Artists at this time were beginning to embrace whatever materials and the environment which best suited the ideology. So we saw artists using wax, fiber, straw, glass, even animal fat and chocolate. Remember the artist that was eating chocolate? Jenny Holzer appropriated advertising and graffiti to expose the corrosive influence of the media and its messages. Barbara Kruger combined slogans and photographs to expose presidential malfeasance. The Guerrilla Girls brought attention to race and gender issues in the arts. Their 1986 report card was reporting on how many women had had one-person exhibitions in any New York City museum and gallery. This is in '86. Just 2 weeks ago, I went to hear the Guerrilla Girls again, and they were still on the road and still performing and still bringing up wonderful issues that have not been resolved yet. That's why it's important to start thinking about and reliving these issues until they begin to get quieter and then resolved. Perhaps it is a reflection of our time, but now, more than ever, artists, I think, are acting as journalists, ethicists, psychoanalysts, philosophers, but most often, I think artists are acting as ordinary citizens. They are examining and reflecting upon a society that seems in desperate need of wanting to be repaired. I see art today as being even more confrontational and at times violent, obscene, disorienting, and shocking. As the subject matter has changed, so have the materials. Putting paint to canvas might not necessarily reign supreme anymore. In their search for the most expressive medium for the delineation of their ideas, artists have turned to clay. As you know, it is plentiful, it is inexpensive, it has a legacy centuries old, and it can be manipulated to elicit the most visceral, intuitive, and primitive qualities needed to support the social, political, and avant-garde issues of our time. They are willing to confront. Clay has proven to be the best material for this diversity of expression. While much has been written about Robert Arneson and California funk, I was just talking about it in Brandon's class this afternoon in the 70s, it is really important to get past this one note of the low-down humor, a term that was often associated with Arneson's art, that funk. He was a courageous artist. He shocked us with the grotesqueness of this funk John. And, you know, he did this piece at the invitation of the competition that the Kohler Sanitary Toilet Company made. They had an exhibition. So can you imagine that here Kohler, the sanitary clean white porcelain, was sponsoring an exhibition, and Arneson decided to make this piece. It was incredibly disgusting. It was dirty and low down. And I'm doing that, aren't I? So Arneson has always been at the cutting edge. He made this most disgusting thing, and when it was thrown out of the exhibition, and I interviewed him for my dissertation, I spent like 3 weeks with him, he said, Judy, he said, the moment they threw it out of the show, I decided to make 30 more. So that's what an artist does. They see these interserts, these areas where there's controversy, where their art can make a difference. And so he overcame that fear, the perversity, and the amusement to really force the spectator to re-examine personal values. He went on, confrontation, shock, protest, senselessness, a kind of absurdity and fun were all underlying themes in his early work. But in time, I found through my dissertation and talking with him, the messages that he went way beyond funk. They became more poignant and befitting a true satirist in such works as this General Nuke. And he did an incredible thing, what Brancusi often did, with creating pedestals that also spoke to what the art was about. So it's not a great picture, but the pedestal here is layered with bodies stacked up. And it's incredibly poignant to see that, and the missile as a phallic nose. Or the sarcophagus with the powers of the world powers deciding the fate of man with holding the peace sign, and as though it were a dead body, of course, deciding the fate of man. And I was so pleased because, you know, satire is all about a joke. Mort Saul, the early satirist, for the generation who might know what that is about. Now we have Stephen Colbert, right? But the fact is that satirists, when they go really to the end, they really want to change thinking. And through humor, change thinking. And that's a wonderful thing. In War Memorial, and this is to me one of the most powerful things done in clay, this charred, no doubt by radiation, this gaunt, hairless head rests up on a capital column looking up at the sky with the rats etched along the base. The head torn from the body reveals these wide, empty sockets that stare up at this lifeless sky. You can almost hear a cry from its grotesquely distorted mouth. And across the top is stenciled War Memorial. I saw this recently. This work came back on the market. It was at the George Adams Gallery in New York, and I had never seen it in person. And I was so shocked by the scale. It's a huge work, and it was just so impressive. It was one of, to take clay, which is fired in the kiln, and to make the head look like it's been fired, burnt up. That's the beauty of the material. You can't get another material to duplicate that. Another artist is Howard Cotler. And throughout his influential career, he made innovative use of store-bought plates to use as a canvas to apply decals in imaginative but very biting ways that visually and psychologically focus on social and political issues. He sort of looks like George Orr there, doesn't he? So lookalikes, part of this box set of plates that satirize the American classic painting by Grant Wood. And he was a supreme craftsman. Not only did that decal, was commercially available, and all he did was buy a plate, didn't make it, buy the decals, cut out the faces to make it his own. So he didn't own anything but the idea. And once that happened in the field, there was a great deal of controversy in the ceramic field that he could do something like that. But then set it in a box to homage to Grant Wood, the wood box, with the decal in the middle. And then that whole series is a set of 12 plates. And every one is a different decal manipulation of the Grant Wood. He did the same thing satirizing the American flag in this dinnerware set called American Supperware. And this was a satire about the American flag. So here we have Drip Dry. And he took the flag, the decal, cut it up, and then it was during the Vietnam War. And here the America was hanging out to dry. Or here, this one is called Exhausted Glory, Old Glory. And the race car, there's a little car here, and the exhaust of the race car. So the double entendre of the stream of exhaust of the car, but also referencing America's exhaustion of fighting in the Vietnam War. Double Identity is a huge work, not only referring to his own identity as a homosexual, but in the myriad identities that clay can assume with decals and glazes. And the beauty of this is that it's gold, it's marble, no, it's all clay, it's just decals. And this is the back of it, so that you see that profile and his Fu Manchu mustache. Well, now, having set the stage, I would now like to introduce the newest installment of the artist provocateur in this show called InCiteful Clay. These younger artists, I think, are working in styles that are just as aggressive, just as disturbing, irreverent, sometimes humorous, but always passionate. They create objects that I think speak to the angst of our day. Then in doing so, they share an emphasis on narrative content, the representation of figure and figuration, and a desire to strengthen art to society. The show is grouped into 5 sections, and it's not meant to pigeonhole, but merely illuminate a kind of structure which I thought would help the public grasp some of the major ideas that we're dealing with. So the first is the human condition. Clay, traditionally a medium for decoration, historically tied to positive and pleasant experiences as you sit around the dining table, is not meant to be an existential category. But here artists are asking the question, who am I? What am I? How do I function in this world? In other words, what is a meaningful existence in the 21st century? Seeing Red is from Patty Warashina's Drunken Power series, which makes use of a sake set as a metaphor for the discourse for a world that is drunk with power. We see this trigger-happy, crazed individual, the pouring ooer, wearing a jet strapped to his head, which is the lid, and a cannon barrel held in the mouth for the spout. His hands are holding a silver bomb, and he is ready to blast off, and the rockets that surround him are these lidded cups waiting to blast off. Arthur Gonzalez uses the childhood story of Pinocchio to teach society that the tragic tale of consequences of lying is still not learned. As continuous examples in the loss of public trust and the futility of human beings saving the planet while at the same time killing the planet. And I think Arthur Gonzalez is one of these real geniuses that are able to handle mixed media. There are not many ceramic artists who can incorporate found materials the way he does. He studied glass, so the Pinocchio noses are usually blown in glass, and he can blow them out really, very well in glass, and they're really quite powerful. Fear has big eyes, draws Sergei Isipov's rich imagination, and based on his life experiences. He's a very interesting artist, using exact techniques. The rendering capabilities in his work is so sensitive and portrays his implied personal interpretations of life. He's an artist that has come from Estonia, and he comes with a rich tradition of hand painting skills. You know, the Russians and the Russian ceramics is so rich in surface decoration, and he brings that to his work. These are very psychological. He met a woman in America, married, and what I think was also interesting is that the underside, which I was able to, and thank goodness Exhibits USA is sensitive to the curator's desire to show the underside of the work. Normally, if you owned this piece, you would know that this is the underside. But for the exhibition, we put a mirror there. So you see how exact his work is, that he even makes the foot, the part that you would normally never see, be part of the expression. But the part maybe you wouldn't want a lot of people to see. But it's about his psychological involvement with his wife. Cheryl Tall's Debt Monster highlights the house as dwelling, the shelter, the temple, the dynasty, the prison, the castle, the fortress, the retreat. It's a nest, but most recently it was the collapse of the American housing market and the crisis that fell upon so many in their desire to own their own home. Crisis, despair, loss of intimacy, and the overcrowding of the city's housing has always permeated inner fears. Beautifully made also, the craftsmanship in coiling these pieces together and the power of the face. It does make you feel like a house can overpower you. And this narrative of Richard Shaw's wedding cake, I don't know, maybe in the recent rise of divorce, etc., the wedding cake, she gets the big half in the divorce. The groom gets the little part. What's wonderful about this, of course you can't know about this in the show, but as curator, this is actually a lidded casserole. And so this is a lid that comes off, and inside is a pot. Only Tim had the pleasure of knowing it when he was handling all these materials. I hope you're also seeing that the range of expression in clay is so vast that one can get any kind of surface, and so from underglazing to overglazing. Bonnie Seaman has been using plants and sea forms and human anatomy, which at first glance might really appear to be like some rhubarb or cabbage leaves, but are meant to be muscle, cartilage, and bones. She reflects on life and disease and the process of survival. Soft plant and flower forms exist with the raw anatomy, sort of reminiscent of a pomegranate or red corpuscles, juxtaposing the beautiful and the morbid and revealing the beauty from within. And it does take your breath away when you get up close to this to look at the tiny bees and insects that she put among it. I mean, that kind of level of craftsmanship is extraordinary. I hope you all went into the vault. What a perfect place to put 18-karat gold, the big Buddha. It was very apropos. And I think Tip Tolan is one of the stars in the field, working beautifully with the figure. But here we normally see the Buddha in a very stately pose, legs crossed, pontificating about how one should lead the good life and a just life. But here this Avathat, which is a name that was given to the Buddha that's a laughing, loving Buddha, and she chose not to put it in the traditional pose, but looking up, laughing at the world, and in this precious material, blessing you all to have a happy and joyful time. And I think that is a great way to be part of the human condition. I wanted to also show you the quality of Tip Tolan's work in this other piece, this master at creating fragile figures that are so vulnerable. They can be old or innocent, usually in conflict with society itself. And she really is talking about the human condition in this piece known as Tender Flood. And she works when, you should look her up if you're interested in figurative work. She might use, might make a very old woman and then use hair and mix media like that so that you really get the aging and the gray hair, etc. Well, I think clay is probably the sexiest material around. It can be worked soft, but made to look hard. And when hard, it can be made to look soft. Its surface can be shining and wet and glistening, and coated like a skin to resemble flesh. Its malleability can lead to organic shapes and voluptuous curves. And it can be worked with sandpaper and woodworking tools to yield the sharpest edges. Clay can be dark brown to elicit very visceral and scatological associations, or it can be the purest luminescence to rival gossamer wings on an angel. There is no better material than clay to act as a metaphor for the human body, to speak to gender issues or to conjure up bodily functions in clay. Obviously, sexual references and this extravagant fetish-like attention to surface that Jason brings offers a very fresh perspective. And it's provocative in that it's not very comfortable to view. He enjoys using hair, particularly in the wrong place, sprouting from forms that you might think is an ear, or an orifice, or belly buttons, or nostrils. It's human. But in this case, it's just growing out of porcelain. But when you stop to look at it, you almost feel like you're being a voyeur. Maybe somebody's going to come and arrest you for looking at something that you shouldn't. But again, the clay, in its beautiful sensual form, can do that. Andrew Potter makes these little girls centered in these psychological underpinnings of women, young girls reaching womanhood, maturing into sexual awareness. They're very commingled with tenderness and fragility and age, and juxtaposing the positions and the scale. You notice how ambiguous they are, where the head seems larger and the hands seem small. She's really manipulating the shape of the body, and you get a sense of a woman growing from one age moving into another age, maybe to sexual awareness. The elegant, refined, sweetly demure porcelains of Denise Pelletier, called charms and lures, are derived from original receptacles that she found to purify, feed, and flush the body. And she resurrected these shapes from the bathrooms and bedrooms and sick rooms of the late 19th and 20th century. They are arranged in this kind of Nicocene that is both seductive and clinical, smooth, prosthetic pink. The contours meet cold steel and sensuous white forms. They conjure up illness, social disorder, and sex, while the tools of medicine and psychology interact with the female body. Well, the artists in this next category explore the perfidy of war and its brother, politics. Some works treat the concept of war in general without specific reference, and others look at weapons as a source of evil that creeps into our lives, making fear and desperation a common occurrence. Having served as a Marine in the 1991 Gulf War, Erin Toole sends gifts of cups with images of the soldiers that had died fighting. And he sends these cups to elected officials at the White House. And therefore you saw the original letter that was sent to the White House. And then he juxtaposes the responses to other cups that he's made. And what he's trying to do is that he's trying to reconcile. Each cup represents someone who had died. And so he's trying to make vivid to the White House that these people count. This cup is this person. And the response from the White House is sort of a flat, thank you very much. You know, not really responding to the power of what each cup represents. He's really giving these cups away. He gives them away to homeless people, to corporate leaders. He sends them to politicians all the time. And you remember at InCiteful, those of you who were there at the big museum, the Nelson Museum, he had like 500 of them, and at 8 o'clock, anyone could come and take a cup. Because he wanted you to take home that person who lives on the cup. Adrian Crane uses this double entendre to capture the beauty of a field of flowers, which in war-torn locations are often turned into minefields that destroy long after the fighting is over. Their ability to maim and kill still persists. I met her as a graduate student and in California, and she was doing these for her thesis, and I thought they were so poignant. And I met her almost before I even started the book, and just kept that memory alive of these incredible flowers that had turned into landmines. Michelle Erickson's Paradise Lost is a response to America's Middle East military policies in the Middle East. It is based on the fecundary dishes made by the 16th century French potter Bernard Palissy. These, in the original Palissy, we see the voluptuous figure reclining in this field of fertility, but she transforms the goddess into this skeleton figure, which is representing liberty. I find the work particularly powerful. Michelle Erickson has devoted herself to studying old techniques in ceramics and remaking them and reconfiguring them into modern times. So much of her work might look like early American or salt glazed or 18th century English, but she'll update the subject matter to our contemporary times. Now, Akio Takamori has always brought everyday life into the eyes, into his primary figures, whether he's working with his native scenes from Japan, and he'll work with figures that were historically part of the way the women dress in Japan. But here he is being sensitive to the big United States general in this casual military attire as the winner at the Second World War, and the little Japanese emperor in tailcoats, made taller by standing on a gold pedestal, obviously the loser. The image was taken from a photograph of MacArthur with Hirohito and was intended to represent to the Americans and to the Japanese citizens the consequences of war. And I mean, when you see the original photograph, you know, the big America, you know, overcoming Japan, and the way Akio decided to depict it, I thought was really very poignant about war. And his interpretation is loaded with symbolism, satire, and humor. And finally, in this category, Charles Craft. He uses human bone to create his spone, which spone is, you've heard spode, and of course spode is a great bone china made with bone. But he's now asking the world to wash clean and forgive the World War II genocide. So it's formed spone, which he trademarked from this combination of human bone ash, symbolic of the residue of the Nazi crematoria, and spode, the British manufacture of white porcelain. The artists in this next category reveal their concerns about the quality of water, air pollution, acid rain, ozone depletion, drought, famine, global warming, conservation, preservation, and the ravages of disease. And even the uncontrolled population growth and corporate greed. Have I left anything out? It's a tough world. The artists in this category are able to use the natural properties of clay to highlight awareness of the sense of futility engendered by a collective awareness of this rapidly degrading planet. Linda Cordell depicts animals as victims of human indifference and violence and commingles them with the exploitation of these helpless, anguished animals for consumption. Vern Funk in Schwitz is talking about extreme heat and the human reaction to global warming, something the earth no doubt will experience if we don't continue on our present course of taking care of fossil fuels. Noel of Creeds addresses the social, political, and environmental issues of nuclear power. Here, the baby Buddha, who represents Japan, sits not under a tree, but a mushroom cloud. His eyes bleed for the disaster that has befallen Fukushima, and the Japanese people. And just to add, for the diversity of clay expression, I wanted to include Chad Curtis's involvement in his investigation with food production and the system of how removed we are from the real experience of how food is manufactured. This very sterile and homogenized materials, the cows become a kind of fluid extension of the synthetic landscape, the complex system that is both seductive and I think quite alarming. And these raise real ethical issues about how we raise the food that we eat and how they are made for consumption. Marianne Webster also draws on Bernard Palissy and a rich storehouse. If you've ever seen an original Palissy, he was a naturalist, and he would go out and make drawings of seed incrustations and animals and worms and snails, and do these incredibly laden plates. And in front of the Sèvres Museum in Paris, there is a statue to Bernard Palissy, and I was always so thrilled because they hold one of the largest selections of his work. But in the hands of Marianne Webster, look what she's done. It's called dioxin C. It's a response to the cancer and the mutations caused by dioxin, the pollutant that is often present in seafood, and warnings now that we have not to eat it, or to eat it in moderation. She brings to light this genetic modifications, the insecticides, the herbicides, and the chemical contaminations of the environment that has irrevocably changed nature today. But this mutant fish growing a chicken leg, pretty powerful. And Paula Winokur, in this piece called Global Warnings, she is trying to alert the viewer of the planet, and these small globes contain messages of information. You should go up to them and read some of the messages on them. And they cite different ways that we have, that our actions are altering the planet. She wants us to pay attention to that now. And so there are little messages in there, and they are global feelings like the world. They're warning you. Adelaide Paul questions animal welfare and the lack of the moral framing surrounding consumption. This pup fetus, disturbing, but simultaneously alluring and strangely hairless and smooth. And it's set on this leather cushion upon which it seems to be enthroned. Both are sort of similar to human skin. And she's trying to make it this uncomfortable relationship, this physical relationship, to seduce the viewer while also instilling an intrinsic distaste for how we handle animals. The artists now in this last category, they challenge the consumer-oriented world that we have imposed on our cultural values and the marketplace. Within this context, power, publicity, money, glamour, greed, fame, shopping, lots of shopping, and morality are all seen as grist for these artists' mills. This one is quite hysterical because J.J. McCracken has taken wet clay and has encapsulated it into a vacuum form, like you would preserve food if you're going to freeze it. So they're sort of stuck in time. There's no use. You can't use it at all, but it's sitting useless, like so many bags of pretzels on a stand that you can come and that are brought up into the marketplace. How many things do we see in the marketplace that really don't bring any value, but are just there and asking you to consume and to consume over and over? Money Can Buy Me Love is Toby Bunigario's commentary on female cliches. She is really an over-the-top artist who uses gold lusters and bejeweled ladies flaunting the prospects of overconsumption, which is related to sex, power, and money. And this is not the picture of the work that's on display now, but because he substituted it. But what Ronaldo does, which I think is really funny, he'll go to Hermes or to Tiffany, and he'll buy something because he wants the box. He gives the contents away, which is quite generous, but he uses the box as the platform or the pedestal to which he then puts a ceramic crown, showing that the new aristocracy is not by birth, but by what you own and where you spend your money. And so the fragility of that, I think, blurring the class distinctions between the upper close social class and the lower classes in terms of what one buys. Money buys power. And Hermes and Tiffany are the pure examples. The piece that you have here in the exhibition is sitting on Tiffany boxes, that beautiful turquoise. But I've seen them on the Hermes boxes. And the last piece that I'm going to show you is Shalene Venezuela, really a young artist who's been working with women's themes, women trying to blend in this case, this blender. And she's depicting this popular culture sort of gender-based roles. So she uses irons and ironing boards and toasters and toaster ovens and anything that is really around the kitchen that really labels women to that cause. And then she depicts these fabulous scenes of women performing their roles. And that is the end of the consumption. So I hope now that you're beginning to see that clay is this incredibly chameleon-like material that permits a variety of topics that I think no other medium can. It is measurable by this oldest material and yet this newest material that is inciting artists to work in ways that is stirring up the pot even more, if I can use that metaphor. While to incite is to provoke, to stimulate, to motivate, and inform, the title is also meant to refer to the fact that the 28 artists in this exhibition are offering insight, S-I-G-H-T, understanding, reflection, philosophical mindfulness, and their aesthetic to make meaningfully made objects. And I hope maybe if you go back and look at the show, perhaps with some fresh insight that I hopefully have given you, that you too will be moved by the issues that these artists have raised and feel as passionately about them as I do. And I really thank you for coming and showing up and seeing the exhibition, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you. I see many ceramicists in the audience and artists from other areas, not only clay, and teachers and academics from all across the board. So I would welcome any questions or discussion or issues or problems that you might have had with the work, because we're here as an open forum. So think about it, and yes.
I'm a ceramic artist and student. I'm a ceramic artist and student, and in looking at this work and the makers of the work, there's quite a diversity, not just in gender. Could you speak to that, and then also to what you see with up-and-coming ceramic artists? How do you see the future?
The younger generation of artists that I've seen, let's say at InCiteful in Kansas City just last week, 2 weeks ago, they are reflecting how art has now become. It's not media specific. I see artists that are willing to go beyond their comfort zone with a material and incorporate video, incorporate graphic. I bought sewing machines for the ceramic department because my male students are sewing, and I bought digital embroidery, and they're now, instead of using decals, they might stitch a pattern or design and then glue it onto the ceramic surface, because the lines in art have become more blurred. And we've seen that for a while. Artists are using much more mixed media. They're using wood. They're using, as I said, it's much more eclectic. Crossovers, morphing, changing. Again, it's not being sacrosanct to a material just because you know it, but to bring the material that best fits the expression. And if you're having problems expressing what you want in one material, then you should move to another material. And that's what I'm seeing. And that show at the Kemper, for example, was filled with mixed media. They had furniture in it. Remember the Tang? He used Chinese furniture and was putting objects on Chinese furniture and lots of fabric. I think that's what's happening. Does that answer your? Good.
Who grew up on the influence of Verdi, Shoji Hamada, and the influence from Japan especially. I'm thinking, I wish Bernard Beach were here tonight.
So do I. I'd love to meet him.
Because he would have been, turned on his head by what's happening to people who look at clay today.
Let me say something about that. I am just showing you a cross-section of one kind of work that's happening today in clay. If you wanted me to come back and give a lecture about Leach's influence and the potters that are now around, why is it that the New York Times, about 3 weeks ago, had a lead article is why handmade ceramics is so popular? New York Times. Making pots has never been more important. Why? Because people need it as an antidote to the electronic world that we're living in. People want to touch things that were touched by human hands. You want to sit at a table and eat out of a cup that has personality. It doesn't look like it was falling off of an assembly line. We have too much assembly lines in our life. So isn't it wonderful to have handmade clothes or handmade plates? And Bernard Leach and Hamada would love what's happening in the world today. I'm just showing you a segment of a particular thing that I'm interested in at the moment. My book, Confrontational Ceramics, I have to say, really has caused a movement to develop. People writing me from all over the world, Palestinians, Israelis, Turkish people. I have an Iranian scholar with me this semester. Why? Because he read Confrontational Clay and wants to come and see what's happening in America. So I'm just offering a cross-section of what I'm interested in the moment and what I now think is a really powerful thing, that clay artists are entering mainstream art, making comments about life as any painter or sculptor would. And Bernard Leach and Hamada, alive and well in the clay community that makes beautiful crafted pots. And I've never seen at InCiteful, I've never seen so many potters, and all selling well. In New York City area, the article of the Times mentioned how many clay studios, community studios, have opened up in Brooklyn. Like 18 different places. People leave work at 5 o'clock from Wall Street, and they go over to make pots. Greenwich House Pottery, that old community-based social welfare area, I forgot what you call it, but community-based settlement house. They've been in business for 40, 50 years, and they've never had more classes. They're going day and night. More people are making clay. And brown pots, but beautiful pots, are very much with us. So don't fret. Nothing has changed. In fact, it's better for all of the arts. Sewing is coming back. As more people, I think, have more leisure time, as the assembly line and robots driving cars by themselves, as people will get more leisure time, the arts and people who know how to teach art and communicate about art and make art alive in your everyday life will become even more powerful in society, I think. Are you happy? Good. Because there's something for everybody in clay and in art generally. I mean, I've made my life's goal. I mean, I'm on the K-12 Foundation board, so I'm trying to keep clay alive in the K-12 experience and watershed residency, and I'm on the board of Studio Potter. So I'm trying to do things that will keep this material alive and working. And when you think of all the residencies and all the places in the world one can go for clay, it's extraordinary. Okay, thank you very much. I kept you very well.